Do you want to start us off though with the Cavaliers? We're gonna try. We say this all the time, but I am gonna have a clock here. We were gonna do 8 minutes, but when I went on the box and one with Coach Spins, he did 7 minutes per team, and I feel like that gives us some leeway if we do actually go over to maybe the podcast will actually be an hour for
We'll
these.
see.
And also
So
7x7's catchy, so I'm stealing it. The idea is not stolen from Spins. We did a different type of exercise, but 7x7, thank you. I mean, I guess it's like 7x14, but we will have the Western Conference probably next week. Because I'll do something with the playoffs later this week, but we're trying to go 7 minutes per team, which entails me actually remembering to keep track of this. So my phone is in front of my face and we're starting the clock on the Cavaliers. Mr. Adam Frommel, what's your biggest question for them heading into the offseason?
I think from a transactional perspective, the obvious question is revolving around Colin Sexton. Is he going to come back coming off this season that was cut short by injury? Is he going to go elsewhere? He said that he wants to come back. Are they going to? But I think even more importantly is if he does come back or if he doesn't, and they're relying solely on internal improvement, is there enough in Cleveland to improve an offense that finished in the bottom third of the league? Because this defense is phenomenal, but unless the offense catches up, it's too susceptible to these ugly losses that ultimately kept it out of a true playoff position, forced it into a play-in game, which did not go so well.
And I'll clarify this quickly, and it's very clear that you approached it the same way. And it doesn't pertain to the Cavaliers. I steered clear of, since we aren't the draft lottery, who are they going to take at number such and such?
I have nothing about the draft in any of mine.
So just like, when we get to the Pistons, the Magic specifically, that stuff is relevant. So just wanted to throw that out there. Mine is and look, that makes sense. You also have to ask, this is a question that's branched off of that, is do you have Garland, Sexton, LeVert on the same team? Is that something that you want or should do? And my question is kind of in a similar vein of, do you need, what's more of a priority for this team? Is it getting a wing so that Larry Markkinen isn't playing the three and you're getting away from the three big lineups that had a lot of defensive success? Or are you just prioritizing maybe shooting however it comes, where do you want to actually upgrade the Isaac Okoro spot? Or let's just say you're getting a shooting wing in general. Is that shooting wing, if you sign him or trade for him, do you want him to come off the bench? Are you trying to upgrade from Isaac Okoro? Are you trying to replace Larry Markkinen? And so there's the inherent question, I think, that's tied to Sexton of, could he get you what you need in a sign and trade? Because there are very few teams with cap space that can give him an offer sheet that's significant. I don't know what his value is.
He wanted like 400, I think. And it was the last we heard.
My guess would be that he doesn't get it just after this injury. But that being said, like the only teams that can really, and they have to want to have cap space would be Detroit, Indy, Orlando, Portland, and the Spurs. And so like those aren't, none of those teams spring to mind. Like maybe Detroit, but they might.
I actually think San Antonio would be kind of fun.
They just have so many guards
right
types already. And Orlando is like, he probably really upgrades their offense, but you have Cole Anthony and you have a logjam there. If you're going to add to that or decongest it, it needs to be for someone better than Colin Sexton. Yep. Also Jalen Suggs, there's overlap there. But is there like I thought about, what do you think about him in Washington with Bradley Beal? Is there like a sign and trade there to where maybe you get KCP or Kuzma as part of it? And
that might be my favorite fit, just again, from a purely fit perspective. But as for Cleveland, like I think it's the shooting wing route. Like that's what I would like to see the Cavaliers do, even if it does come at the expense of some of those three big lineups that, as you said, had defensive success. Because I actually do believe in the internal improvement route for this offense, if only because of Evan Mobley, where he struggled a good bit on offense as a rookie, but you could see those flashes, the face-up game, the turnaround jumpers, the ability to create off the bounce. And you have one of the five best passers in basketball on your team already in Darius Garland. I don't really want someone like Sexton who's going to take the ball out of his hands a lot, while also probably hindering some of that growth from Mobley just by virtue of the missed opportunities. It's nothing, I'm not trying to take away from Sexton's game so much as saying that there's a little bit of overlap that it might prevent the growth we could otherwise see from this team.
Yeah, and I do think you point out that Mobley is going to have more to offer on the ball. You have to be willing to stomach it. But if you have LeVert, Sexton, and Garland on the same team, even if you're staggering them, one of them is going to presumably come off the bench, I would think, then you are still sort of allocating touches away from him. And so it sounds like you would go the let's see. And it could be, if you want to keep Sexton, I'm not saying that he's not worth keeping. Maybe it's do you make the either or decision between him and LeVert? Because LeVert's going to be a free agent after next season as of right now. So do you see what you can get in a LeVert Sexton package? I would argue, just based off age and even injury history now, given that Sexton's coming back from his first major one, Sexton's going to net you more alone than a Cal LeVert so sign and trade. And so I think that's the route I would explore. That being said, on the Sexton front, because are you matching? Let's just say there isn't a deal to be had. Are you matching whatever offer, assuming one comes, that he receives and then figuring out later? Or if you're the Cavs looking at the complexion of your roster, knowing if he's going to, let's just say he costs you north of 20 million still, is there like a leave it point for you where you're like, we'll let him walk away for nothing?
I would probably upwards of like 18 a year.
Wow. I think I would just sign it and figure it out later. I'm not going to lie. Maybe I'm just higher on Colin Sexton than a lot of others.
I can't get some of the reporting that we heard throughout this season out of my head, just about like the locker room issues and whatnot. And I think that's too important with a young team that's clearly on the rise.
I guess I view through the framing of, because LeVert's going to enter free agency, still having Colin Sexton at the end of the day isn't the worst thing in the world, because there's a chance that you don't have LeVert going forward either, and you would still need the secondary scoring. And I do think LeVert's the better.
It's also like the easiest thing to go find.
A secondary, like, I guess, because if you don't think that Colin Sexton can be the secondary, like, I don't want to say floor general, but the secondary ball handler to where he can create for others, I think he can at least fulfill the secondary part of that role, because the scoring is fine. Like, you can go out and you can find a fucking, Jordan Clarkson, but you can't.
That's more what I mean. Yeah. I mean, the creation aspect is interesting, but that also presumes that Colin Sexton is able and willing to create, which is a role that he does not often like to fill.
I would say I would have loved to have seen him more extensively with a talent. Just having the two bigs in Mobley and Allen opens up options he hasn't always had. I am with you, though. I'm team, like, you need to explore the full extent of Mobley's offense. And so I would prefer to move. It doesn't have to be Sexton, but I do think he nets you the most. Can you address the shooting wing stuff by using Sexton as bait in a sign and trade? That would bring us over to 15 seconds to spare on that team.
Look at us go.
Let's start the clock on the Charlotte Hornets. We have to talk about, this isn't the biggest question, will be who are you going to hire from, who are you going to upgrade from James Borrego? Is there an actual, there's an upgrade. If you're signing Quinn Snyder, or maybe even if it's a Kenny Atkinson, or if you really are high on Darvin Ham, here are my thoughts on this. And this is leading into my actual question. Was James Borrego even the issue in Charlotte? And
no.
The only answers I can come up with, and Kanata Edwards, who's a podcast producer at CBS Sports, he was tweeting about this. If you think Borrego just sort of lost the locker room and the players were done with him and he was adversely impacting your relationship with LaMelo somehow, fine. The other thing that I didn't see people talk about is if you wanted Kai Jones and James Bouknight to get more run this year and he didn't give it to them, I don't think either of them would have solved what ails them. Okay, I get it. Those are defensible reasons. The stuff that I have seen that
even with that latter one, though, like it's often tough to pin that on the coach, because it's also like an edict from the front office. Like what you're trying to do right now, if you're trying to win now, if you're trying to develop, that's not solely the coach's responsibility.
Also, I also want to make it clear, I don't think the front office wanted it to happen any other way, because they traded for Trez midseason. That's not a trade you make if you're trying to open up big man minutes for a Kai Jones.
Right.
The thing that gets me here is Charlotte improved by winning percentage, like relative to last season, by the equivalent of 5 or 6 wins. This is year 2 of LaMelo. I get that maybe you feel like you're on a clock more so with him because of the iffy landscape with how big qualifying offers are getting, and will someone eventually take it or try and request a trade? Look, I'll believe it when I see it. There's so much money in that post-rookie extension, life-changing money, generational money. I'll believe it when I see it. But the other thing is, what was James Borrego supposed to do with this defense? The two things I would argue very quickly are they didn't finish in the bottom 10 of points allowed per possession. They overachieved, excuse me. Like that with this, when you look on paper. 2, if you're going to be mad, I saw the stuff like, he didn't maximize or optimize the defensive coverage with Mason Plumlee in it. It's Mason Plumlee. If that's like his failing grace, something's wrong with the way your roster was built. And just as a bonus, I also saw people pointing out some teams defend really well when they play small. Okay, well, some teams don't have Kelly Oubre Jr. or like Cody Martin as their best perimeter defender. Like, that's just you down. Like, you were dealing with a Miles Bridges who increasingly feels like the most aimlessly versatile player on defense I've ever seen. Not ever. That's mean. But again, so I want to hear your thoughts more, Borrego. My actual question had to be, like, are they going to go out and really significantly upgrade the center position? But I want to know what.
I had the cop-out answer, or the cop-out question here, which is like, who is going to coach this team? Because I think it's the biggest thing that matters. And the answer should be James Borrego. Like, I think that the biggest argument I can see against him is the effort one, because the team did come out flat in both playing games, and that's pretty inexcusable. And it's hard to see how that happens for a team that is fully bought in. It's also a young team that hasn't been there before. And I can't get past the amount of player development that we saw under his supervision. I mean, you go up and down the roster and so many players improved. LaMelo Ball, leaps and bounds better on the defensive end. Also, more of an effectively aggressive version of himself on offense. Miles Bridges in the most improved player conversation, both at the beginning and the end of the season. We saw jumps from Terry Rozier. Cody Martin turned into a really useful player. It goes on and on and on and on. So it's hard for me to come up with a good justification for this, unless it is, as you said right off the top, solely about whether he lost the locker room. And we, quite frankly, don't have insight into that.
Sorry, go ahead.
I don't know at this early stage of their offseason who I would tap to replace him. I don't think we know everyone who's going to be available. Quinn Snyder, again, as you mentioned, would be a dream hire if he's available.
Too. I was going to say, like, if you told me you got rid of him because you really think Quinn Snyder's walking through the door,
right? And there might be other available coaches like Steve Nash who you want to avoid.
Look, the Nets don't have a head coach. Steve Nash
is
in charge of, as Jason Concepcion said, only handling the vibes. Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving handle like the X's and O's, is very clearly, because there aren't many X's and O's on that team.
It's pretty simple. It's an X here and an O there, and then the 4 other X's in the corners. So no, I don't know who I would even want them to go after at this point, but James Borrego seems like a good option.
So I had the center question of what are they going to do to upgrade it? Because I think that you absolutely need to upgrade it. The question is, will you? You don't have money to spend, and your financial situation is going to get a little bit more fickle, which would be the other question here. They have no option other than to match whatever offer sheet Miles Bridges gets, correct?
Yep.
Assuming he gets one.
100%.
You have to. You didn't move him before. You should have signed him to an extension. I would bet would have been significantly less than the max. We'll see how much he ends up getting in free agency this time. Then it's when you get down to the center conversation, it's, are you willing to use either Book Knight, Jones, you have Oubre Jr. salary, you also have Gordon Hayward salary. Are you willing to go after a Miles Turner or a Rudy Gobert? Or are you going to go like the cheaper route where it's, Nicholas Claxton, Mitchell Robinson, maybe those need to be signed in trades anyway, just because are they going to get more than the mid-level? I guess they could. Do you trade for something like, or do you go after a Chris Boucher or a Kevon Looney? Which route would you go? If you're there?
I mean, we've talked about the Gobert and Charlotte option before, and if that's even remotely feasible, that's where I want to go. Because
even though he's owed 4 years and like 1 season.
Yes, especially because that becomes easier to do when LaMelo Ball is still on rookie scale. You figure that part out later,
right? I just would wonder if even before LaMelo, having Rudy, Miles Bridges on his new deal, I guess you're getting rid of Hayward, but then you have Rozier's like basically $100 million deal. It's
right.
Like $5 million less than that.
The other benefit, though, is if you bring in someone at that price point or a similar one, then you guarantee that there is a snowball's chance in hell that Russell Westbrook is wearing a Charlotte uniform.
Wait, I'm sorry. What? Run that back.
If you overpay for a center, you don't have the budget to go out and get Russell Westbrook.
Oh,
that's my other big question for Charlotte is, who can we petition to just not call the Lakers?
The only thing I'll say on the Westbrook front is if you're getting off, if you want to just reset your books, and I know Charlotte's not a free agency destination, but you want to use it for trades or something, I'm I would understand Westbrook's expiring. And if you're going to actually go through a rebuilding year, do you buy him out or whatever? If I'm them, I'm not getting Gobert. I feel like the cost would be too high. I would look at so the cost I came up with for them, and we can wrap this up there, is if, let's say the Pacers are still willing to trade Miles Turner, are you doing Hayward, PJ Washington, then the number 15 or 13
Yes.
for Miles Turner?
Yes.
And I do think that leaves you with enough assets to then, because you don't really have great wing defenders. I think that would leave you with enough assets to, if you wanted to turn around, give your other first round pick plus Bouknight or Kai Jones plus Terry Rozier or Oubre for Jeremy Grant. Like, if you're getting Kai Jones and a pick and you're Detroit and then you're getting Rozier, are you saying no to that Jeremy Grant trade? Kai Jones, let's say Kai Jones, number 13, and Terry Rozier.
No, I'd probably do that one as well.
I think they might prefer Oubre, but just like if I'm going to take on Jeremy Grant and pay him, I'd probably prefer to get off Terry Rozier's contract. They're low key might be one of the most fascinating teams of the offseason. Now,
they're really interesting.
The Borrego one.
The New York Knicks are going to be next up, and my question for them.
Let me just put 2 hours on the clock. Okay, go.
My question for them is, who are the building blocks here? Because until you determine that, it's really tough to figure out where to go from here. And if you look up and down this roster, there are 5 or 6 players where you can ask is he a building block question and not really have a clear answer. Julius Randle looked like it last year, did not look like it this season. Are you trying to move him? RJ Barrett, probably the most clear-cut yes answer to this question. Mitchell Robinson, given the complete lack of growth we saw in regression in some important areas, I'm not sure that he should qualify. Quickly, he just slashed 39-2, 34-6, 88-1. And then we get to Obi Toppin, Cam Reddish, Quentin Grimes, Miles McBride.
That can't, by the way,
these guys were
disaster.
Yeah. These are guys where there's some upside. Do you want to call them a foundational piece? I mean, if you do, congrats on your perpetual lottery appearances. So I struggle to come up with any sort of feasible, cohesive, concrete plan for New York until you can answer this question, which is just, who are you building around? Is it only Barrett?
Look, so I would frame it this way to answer your question before we get into mine. There is no one, absolutely no one on this roster that would affect who I target in the draft if I think they are the best player available. That includes Barrett. I don't care if there would be overlap. It just so happens that Barrett would probably be pretty easy to fit into whoever, or in a trade. That's just, there's the wrong star to target. And I don't think Donovan Mitchell's going to become available. I would be surprised. I want to make that clear. I don't know if Donovan Mitchell's that star. He's just regressed so much defensively. I would be curious as to, is that the guy you're willing? But if you deem him the guy or the next star to come available, there's no one on this team that is impacting the way I view that. And that includes Barrett.
Fair.
I think he showed a lot of improvement towards the end of the season, but until that aggression translates to more efficient finishing at minimum, I don't know that you could call him. He is their best building block. And I think I'd be willing to go too deep here and say him and Quickly are the closest you get to foundational pieces. I just think Toppin, shot of adrenaline, he's always going to be more complimentary than not.
Fair.
And I'm just curious, where do you land on that?
He's probably the closest one to joining Barrett. I still think I would consider Barrett a foundational piece, but not at the expense of doing anything. Toppin is probably my number 2 in that conversation, which probably says a lot about the state of the Knicks right now, because he would not be a number 2 for almost any other team. So the defense is still a huge issue. I don't honestly know what he can do at this point, because he exploded onto the scene during the closing stretch of this past season, which is kind of like the silly time of year when we see so many illegitimate breakouts because of opportunity against backups.
Which is fair. I mean, yeah, an Obi Toppin.
I'm out on Quickly though.
You're out?
I'm out on Quickly. I just don't see it.
Why?
If without him being a lockdown defender, which he's not, I just don't see the offensive efficiency to justify the role that he needs to fill.
That might be one of the more takes that I fundamentally disagree with that you've had. To put him in as a foundational piece in a vacuum, I get that skepticism, but to just be out, just on someone who can hit these like long off the dribble threes, has the stop and start floater. I think is getting a little bit better as a
If
passer.
you want to talk about him filling like the Jordan Clarkson role, awesome.
No.
Beyond that, like I don't think I see much more.
I think he is more likely to fill, and I think this player is going to be significantly better just based off how he finishes and can get to the basket, where Quickly's game is always going to stall out. He is more likely. The outcome for me is he's going to be his peak to a Jordan Poole than Jordan Clarkson.
Whoa.
Jordan Clarkson doesn't have the playmaking awareness or there's the versatility on offense. But
I am currently viewing Jordan Poole as a future multi-time All-Star.
I would say that I don't think Quickly's a multi-time All-Star, but to say that he's like Jordan Clarkson and is his ceiling feels borderline insulting.
I'm okay with that.
My question for them.
I'm not here to save his feelings, Dan.
But you are here to be accurate, and I feel like that one's wildly to just be out on Emmanuel Quickly after a year or two when he didn't receive like actual developmental time until like really towards the latter third of the season. Sure, what? You're not defending your point. You're just saying, sure, what?
I don't see it. Even when he is on the floor.
Like, can you ascribe something to that other than I just don't see it?
Because his role hinges on shot making ability, and he doesn't make shots. To me, it's as simple as that. Like it's the fundamental issue is that he makes those occasional super difficult looks that then give him the confidence to keep firing away at these inopportune times. That's a tough mentality to change, especially when he's not hitting them with any sort of consistency. Like what in the statistical profile, granted, the situation has been bad, the development has been bad, the coaching has been bad, but what has he done that's like concrete evidence that there is something to fall in love with here?
He increased his assist rate by 50% this year on lower usage in general. He also improved his 2-point percentage by like 4 percentage points while not taking appreciably easier.
To what?
What? It's year two. You're 45% on twos is not something that I'm going to declare as the end of the world, especially when it's not him getting to the rim every 5 seconds and missing bunnies. So like it'd be nice if he got to the rim more. 9% of his shots coming at the rim last year, but he's still like 63.1% inside 3 feet. There are worse marks to have. I agree that the shot selection could improve, but to even be around 35% from three on the volume that he was propping up in lower minutes, on the difficulty that was ascribed to a lot of his looks. And it's fair to not say, we can't, read too much into what happens at the end of the year, but I do think there's value in having a rhythm, and the Knicks not giving him any sort of like real functional cadence to where you didn't necessarily understand his role for huge portions of the season puts him at a disadvantage. And I'd also be curious to see what a team that's actually more willing to get in transition consistently and afford him more space in the half court to work with, what he can actually do there. And so I feel like there's a lot. Jordan Poole has gotten to play with future Hall of Famers in their prime.
Sure.
His entire career. And so
benefited tremendously.
And his ceiling is higher than
as a development.
He's
player.
way better. Yeah, Quickly's not Maxey. Quickly's not Halliburton. I'm not putting him in the same conversation. To just be out after year two, though, feels very premature.
Well, I didn't really contextualize what out means. Again, like Jordan Clarkson role has value.
Does it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Year voters, yeah, for sure.
Well, there's still a lot of value in having that guy who can come off the bench and take and hit some difficult shots. I just don't know how scalable that is.
We'll have to find out. I'm going to bookmark this take. My question, since we're already over the time limit, is: are they going to pick a direction or still be in the middle? I don't. If I was them, they're going to remain in the middle because they're the Knicks. If I'm them, it's sort of the crap or get off the pot scenario where it's, if you really want the star, there's going to be, it's throw it in. Find the star. There'll be one available. Throw it in. Actually try and build what could be a real contender, or like trade the veterans and let's see what the kids give you. And I still remain a proponent of, if you're the Knicks, and people have told me they think that the Knicks would need to get a first-round pick or two as part of this, I'm absolutely trading Julius Randle, Evan Fournier, and Alec Burks for Russell Westbrook. And you can try and buy out Westbrook, whatever. And first of all, a team like New York, I don't think free agents necessarily want to play for the Knicks as much as people believe. That being said, that's a team and a market that can find value in cap space one way or the other, more than a Charlotte or a Utah if they're hitting reset. But it also frees up all this runway for the kids. And if the Lakers were to give you one of their distant, like a 2027 pick to do it, to grease the wheels of it, done. And I would go that route. I don't think they will, but I am wondering if they'll pick a direction. Will we be talking about in the middle of the offseason, the end of the offseason, oh, the Knicks, they skewed towards, like they went younger rebuilding, or, all right, they went all in for player X. And I don't think that they have the organizational backbone, clarity, or vision to choose either one.
I'm right there with you. I just, at this point, like expecting something better from the Knicks, regardless of who's in charge, is just kind of foolish.
I have a feeling this next team will start the clock. It was only 9 minutes on the Knicks. We'll start the clock on the Wizards. I have a feeling we have the same question for them, but what is your question on the Wizards?
I avoided the Bradley Beal one.
Okay, I didn't.
Is it worth moving any of the young guys for established talent? I'm talking about Denny Avdia, Daniel Gafford, Corey Kispert, and Rui Hachimura, because they've been resistant to including especially Avdia and Hachimura in any trades to this point. But if you already have Bradley Beal, and for all we know, the plan is to continue holding on to him, though that is still up for debate, and you have Kristaps Porzingis now, is it worth turning any of those guys into something that can help you win now?
I think I'm in love with Denny Avdia, so I would say no. And yours actually is, I was going to say, is Bradley Beal staying, or are you actually going to go out and trade for a point guard to play next to Bradley Beal that makes sense? Because let's be honest, at the peak of their powers, we know Russ wasn't a great fit. Dinwiddie clearly wasn't a great fit. Was John Wall ever really like the perfect point guard to play with Bradley Beal? We probably never saw the peak of them together, to be fair.
But who is? Like what archetypally, who are you trying to put next to Beal?
I have a player. I'm just curious as to what you think. Malcolm Brogdon.
Jack of all trades, do everything, can create for himself. Yeah, I mean, that's like the exact kind of thing I would want, except I would like a little bit more on defense. I actually view like 5 years ago Kyle Lowry as what I want, which obviously is hard. I don't have an answer. I'm just thinking like from an archetypal perspective, like who the ideal kind of fit is without
present day Van Fleet. Is that where he's on?
Yeah, something like that would be really ideal. DeJounte Murray would be really fun, but you're never getting him. This is not like a realistic scenario so much as just a thought exercise.
Would you do the thing that I think they do have like wings to spare when you look at, or wing type bodies in Rui, Avdia, Kuzma, KCP. Both KCP's non-guaranteed. I'm assuming they'll keep him, or partially guaranteed. Kuzma's a player option, not for this upcoming season, but the next one, 2023. So both of them are going to be free agents in 2023 is what I'm getting at. Rui's going to be a restricted free agent. I'm keeping Avdia unless you're getting if you're pairing Dame with Bradley Beal, it's going to cost you Denny Avdia. I don't think that's winning you a championship, but Beal and Lillard would work offensively. That would be absolutely fine. Would you do KCP or Kuzma, or one of them, and Rui for Malcolm Brogdon?
Yes.
I'm out on Rui. So if you want to call me out for the mistake there, the shooting improved this year. The shot selection is still bad. I don't know what he is on defense. But if I'm Indy, and if you're shopping Malcolm Brogdon, I assume it's because you're concerned about his injuries. He's missed an average of 28 games per year over the last half decade. And so that extension, 3 years, 67-ish.
It's a little concerning.
If you're Washington, are you willing? Because look, Kuzma was so good last year. And so was KCP. I think KCP's better defensively. Kuzma probably gives you, I think, more balance just because he's not going to, if you want someone to create, Kuzma might be the better option at this point. That being said, I'd be reticent because you're putting Malcolm Brogdon and Kristaps Porzingis on the same team. Just as injury risks in general, is that too much to...
And it's not like Beal has stayed perfectly healthy either.
My counterpoint to my own counterpoint, the counterpoint to my counterpoint, if you're keeping Beal, like you have to make some of the bolder win now.
You have to, because you can't just keep treading water. At some point, he's going to say enough is enough.
And
maybe.
I think again, it hurts your wing depth a little bit, but the way Avdia played defensively this year, and if you're keeping KCP and or Kuzma, I think that gives you enough to, and look, if Indy just wants off of Brogdon's deal, figure out a way to step ladder your way there. I know it would take a lot. Like, could you do it before the offseason at that point, but your roster spots would be weird. If you can do it without including KCP or Kuzma, do it. I just don't see the path there.
It's tough to find one.
Because I think what you would have to do, and again, this would be predicated on Indy saying, okay, we want to just get rid of Malcolm Brogdon's salaries. You have to guarantee Ish Smith's salary, which is 4.7. You pair him with Rui, and then and Kispert. I don't even think that gets you there. And you would probably have to, Vernon, like Isaiah Todd. I don't even know if that's enough money, but it would have to be something like that. And those never happen. So that was Brogdon was the archetype of player. I'm just not. The other player I thought about too, since we still have some time left here, is I don't think they could because they already did a deal with them. But could you get in on the Jalen Brunson sign and trade sweepstakes? He would be perfect next to Bradley Beal.
Probably not.
Yeah,
I think the financial path is pretty difficult.
Just because Dallas's defense, you could argue. I think when you look at their rotation, like, yeah, they could use more wings, but it's like, well, why? They just had like a top 7 defense, right. And Bullock got a lot better alongside Smith. And look, point guard's a tough market to crack because there's like
Kyrie Irving, maybe
Ben Simmons,
James Harden.
Oh wow, Philly's not going to get rid of James Harden. That's too far. By the way, my Galaxy brain trade idea would be Ben Simmons for Rudy Gobert and Royce O'Neal over the offseason.
That I feel like we would just like create this black hole in Utah though, because after all of the Donovan Mitchell versus Ben Simmons Rookie of the Year stuff, like
that's why it's a Galaxy brain take though. But they finally get a perimeter defender. They just no longer have a generational rim protector behind him, or
like any chemistry.
That team would be dead last in vibes. No Ingles.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know,
they'd have to hire Steve Nash.
So yeah, I can't, when I'm thinking, and look, if you're going to use the mid-level exception to try and address your issue in free agency, it's not going to happen for the names that are going to be available at that price point. And look, the free agency market is so bone thin this year. When you're looking at point guards, there's Kyrie Irving, Jalen Brunson, and then it's like Patty Mills as a player option. There's Ricky Rubio. I don't think he's a good fit for Beal. You know who'd be interesting?
You seem very excited about this point guard market.
Oh, it's the free agency market's a disaster in general. But here's a name that I don't think this is the answer. Tyus Jones.
I love Tyus Jones's game.
And he would be a fit with Beal.
He would. It's a much lower end fit, but it's a fit nonetheless.
I think it's a perfect fit, but it doesn't take enough of the playmaking responsibilities away from Beal.
You know who else would be interesting? And I can't say this with a straight face because you're going to assume that it's a joke, even though it's not. Monte Morris.
Why is that? Why would I take that as a joke? I think that's a great idea.
Oh, awesome. Just because I can't say anything about him that's complimentary without just people assuming it.
Look, if you're Denver and like they offered you Kuzma or KCP for probably preferably KCP.
It would be really interesting.
And I don't know if you could do it. I think you'd have to include something else. One for the money, maybe Zeke Naji.
I just have to move to DC if that happened.
Would you do that for both teams, Zeke Naji and?
I thought you meant would I move?
I
think that would be a good mutually beneficial deal.
I don't think that Washington really needs another backup 5, but like you need something even more so than money. Like you need something other than Monte Morris because KCP is like they're just like, hey, go guard the best player on the other team, and he does it. Yeah. So that's another team. Really quickly, I don't want an explanation. Is Bradley Beal on the Wizards to start next season? Yes or no?
Yes.
I'm not going to answer it because I honestly don't know. After the Wizards,
that's no fun.
I'm going to say yes, but
there you go. See, you did have an answer.
After the Wizards, we have the Pacers, who are low key, probably one of my 3 most fascinating teams of the offseason. Starting the clock, what is your biggest question for the Indiana Pacers?
How much do you want to bet going forward on good health luck? Because if you do want to bet that there's some sort of progression to the mean when it comes to injuries, you actually have a good team in place right now. Because if Miles Turner, Malcolm Brogdon, and TJ Warren, who it's easy to forget about because he hasn't played basketball in roughly 3 decades, are actually there to be paired with Tyrese Halliburton and a lot of the other intriguing role players in a Pacers uniform right now, this is a legitimately good team that could compete for maybe a top half spot in the Eastern Conference.
And they're just adding maybe a top 5 pick to what would be a intriguing core already.
They've all been hurt all the time.
I'm trying to run through. I mean, Halliburton's fine. TJ Warren's the biggie. But Who like how
Brogdon's
much
going to
is
miss what 10 to 15 games at a minimum. Turner's going to miss 10 to 15 games at a minimum. It adds up.
TJ Warren though? The risk proposition on him, I would assume, is lower because I'm
I
assuming
think so.
he'll get more than Victor Oladipo did when he had to sign the minimum. At the same time, like if anyone's giving TJ Warren a lot of money, is it for more than a year?
Probably not.
Yeah. So that is my question for them, though. Are they going to go the gradual rebuild route or do historically what Indiana has done, where look, this tank, and we'll call it the joke going around now because everyone like the ethical tank, because they
Sure.
still they didn't go the OKC route, even though I think the criticism of OKC is fucking stupid. But if we're going off what they've done in history, they would try to be back in the conversation for the playoffs next season. That being said, the Malcolm Brogdon report from Mark Stein, it's not just like this came from someone random either. This is Mark fucking Stein saying that, and the way he framed it, whereas Indiana has given the indication that they're going to trade Malcolm Brogdon. And the only two conclusions I can draw, because this is a Sacramento situation where you don't have to, there's no Malcolm Brogdon or Tyrese Halliburton. Like you can have both. You don't need to choose between the two. So if it's not that, it either has to be that you're just so down on Malcolm Brogdon's health and that extension that you just gave him, or are you actually contemplating the more gradual rebuild route, in which case, who else is available? And is TJ Warren just gone at that point in free agency? The bigger question would be, is Miles Turner then still available? Because he's 26. He's at that age where it's...
To me, it's a both or none. If you're trading Brogdon, it means you're also trading Turner, because you have to commit to the rebuild in that scenario, because you're not going to get back even present day value for Brogdon, given the injury history and the new extension. You're just not. So to me, it's either they're keeping them together or they're shipping off both of them. Probably not in the same deal, definitely in separate deals.
Sorry, Lakers fans. My thing would be, and looking at mocks, would be, do they just feel like they're going to end up drafting a point guard? But even like if they go after a Johnny Davis, that's not a point guard. And the first point guard...
Also, this class is bad.
That's what I was going to say. The first point guard to come off the market is going to be Jaden Ivey, which and he's combo guard, whatever. I don't think, like, he probably goes top 4, right? And we don't know if they're going to have a pick there. And then after him, it's Ty Washington, who I don't like. Would you take him at 5 or 6?
No.
So that's why I would agree with you, but that would be the other logic. And then look, there's also Buddy Hield, who I think is still, contract's not spectacular, but just someone who could hit difficult threes at a high clip. Teams should want him.
Agreed.
And so if you're trading Brogdon, my guess would be I still don't know what to feel about Turner if you're trading Brogdon, because Turner's so in between. And you also already traded your other big, but you could also look at it from the perspective of, if Miles Turner wants $25 million a year in his next deal, is he worth that to you when you're not necessarily on the immediate track? And when, look, unless you're a megastar center, like, teams aren't technically paying you that type of money. The center is I know he spaces the floor and is a lockdown rim protector. He's in like that fringe star territory that makes it so
feels
difficult.
Like the idea of Miles Turner is still superior to the actual Miles Turner a lot of the time, if only because of availability.
If you were them then, and you are doing the rebuild, and this is the thing that's been going around, are you doing the expiring contract of Westbrook for Brogdon, Hield, 2 picks and 2 swaps? And the first swap wouldn't be exercised until 2026. The first pick itself doesn't convey until 2027. That's creating...
I would still very much not go that route.
There's the whole conversation about front office security. The picks are just so far off into the distance. If you were making... the one way I could see it's arguable is, one, if Kevin Pritchard is just so concerned about job security, he goes and tells Herb Simon, like, look, we're going to need to 26, 27 to see what happens. So let me see this through. Maybe it's easier to spin if you are making subsequent deals, where if you're getting immediate draft equity and prospects for Turner, that you're okay. But even 2026, and knowing that the Lakers could technically luck into another star somehow, I probably wouldn't do it either. But that's been the scenario that I think has been just floated the most since the Lakers season ended.
Yeah, I can't get the idea of both or none out of my head here.
Do you think if you had to guess, or one, What would you do to what do you think they do?
I would ride this out because I still believe in the core, but I don't think they're going to, if only because of the reporting that we're seeing and from who's reporting it. Because if there's no if Brogdon hasn't asked out and that's still the leading rumor right now, that's one of those there's enough smoke that there's definitely fire situations.
I'm with you on every front, except I still don't have a stance on the Turner situation anymore because I could very much see them being, look, he's 26, we'll pay him, he'll stay here, we can always move him later. One question that might answer that, if they jump in to like the top three of the lot, like if they're in Chet Holmgren or Paolo or even Jabari Smith territory, does that make it easier? Because in theory, you could pair Turner with any one of them, probably.
You absolutely could.
But I do think if you end up with one of those three players, maybe it makes it more likely that Turner is. After Indiana, we're going to move on to the Detroit Pistons, and we'll put 7 minutes on the clock. What is your biggest question for the Motor City Pistons?
My biggest question is Jeremy Grant question mark. It's just, what are they going to do with him? He's under contract for $21 million next year. It is an expiring deal. He is tremendously appealing across the league because of what he can do as a shot creating, defensively versatile forward who can take and make 3-pointers, who can attack the basket. He can fill all of those different roles. And his timeline just doesn't match up with this young and aggressive Pistons team, especially given what we saw Detroit do in his absence down the stretch when they played a lot differently. They handed a lot more minutes to the young guys. They really made it Cade Cunningham's team, and all of a sudden they were super competitive. So I think that's the impetus they need to actually pull the trigger on a deal here. And it's just a matter of what that's going to look like. Are they going the established star route, just at a different position? Are they trying to get even more draft equity to bring in another big name young player to pair with Cunningham on this super young timeline? It could go any number of directions because any number of teams could and should have legitimate interest in Grant.
And also, I've moved away from the timeline doesn't match the team's timeline. I'm not as for that. It is legitimate, especially in this case, because he is in the last year of his deal.
Yep.
And
I don't care about the age thing. It's just that you're going to have to pay him.
4 years, 112 is his max extension, which a lot of people think he'll get. And look, I'm all for players getting paid. From a team's perspective, that's not a no-brainer decision when talking about a non-star. It's just he's 28. It's not a no-brainer decision. That is certainly the biggest question for them. I did give, would you have done this is like repeating a question, but if you're getting the 13th pick, Kai Jones and Terry Rozier, is that enough value to get Jeremy Grant? I think it was for me.
I think so.
I like Terry Rozier, which the question of my question for the Pistons, sorry, I don't know why I can't talk, is how are they planning to flesh out the roster around Cade Cunningham? And this was Spins and I had actually talked about this. Are you going the like frenetic athleticism route where because Cade Cunningham is this bigger player who's effectively a point guard, and even Killian Hayes is big for a 6'5", 6'6", whatever he is. So are you trying to go like with just a bunch of like bigger defenders who can guard all these different positions? You have Sadiq Bey there already. Does that mean that maybe you want a more athletic presence at the 5 than an Isaiah Stewart / Marvin Bagley? Certainly has hops, but not the defensive chops.
That's future all-star Marvin Bagley, by the way.
Who is he going to be back in Detroit? He's a free agent.
I hope so.
So, and then, or are you going that route, or are you going to be prioritizing optimization offensively, which I think would be at this point. It depends on, I don't know what's going to happen in the draft, but given what Killian Hayes showed towards like the last month or month and a half of the season where he was putting pressure on the rim, had the floater going, I think you just shooting. Like it'd be nice if it was functional shooting, maybe guys who could dribble and defend. Which one of those are you like? Which sort of those roster? Shooting.
Because Cade Cunningham is one of those rare players who can completely control an offense. I'm not talking about a guy who can get his own shots when he wants, but completely control the flow and tempo of a game and look so comfortable doing it. He understands how to manipulate schemes. He understands how to slow the ball down, how to stay calm under pressure, how to draw double teams and find open guys. And he, much like similar players like Luka Doncic, you want to surround them with as much shooting as you can to make it a nightmare for defenses, because he is so good at probing into these spots, figuring out what a defense is doing and hitting the open guy, that if you can truly play a 5-out look with him running the show, you're not going to get stopped.
I guess I would just be, if we're operating under the assumption they are going to move Jeremy Grant, which I agree with you, I think he'll be traded. That's going to compromise your defense. And if you lean into shooting, that could come at the expense of your defense. You look at their offense this past season, and it feels like there were more offensive flags than red flags. But again, if you start to change up the talent, we saw it with the Knicks, who got lucky. They got lucky with their opponent 3-point shooting last year, but they leaned so far towards the offensive route. They went arguably a couple moves too far. Now they had Kemba just didn't pan out. Fournier was up and down. Derrick Rose was injured. And if you're making smarter investments, sure. But I do think, and Spins had argued in favor of this, and it made me rethink to where I don't have an answer for them. I understand the thought process of Cade Cunningham is already so good on offense, and we saw what he did manipulating defenses when he didn't have infinite space around him or dependable shooting and finishing for the entire season around him. Like, why wouldn't you just be like, okay, the offensive end is set because we have this guy. Like, let's call. And look, in an ideal world, you're just surrounding him with a bunch of 3-and-D people. And you definitely want some functional, like, ball handling, obviously. If you had to choose between the two, I actually think it's more of a discussion than I was with you going into that, by the way. And I think I still lean towards space that fucking floor around him and let's see where we get to.
Yeah, I think that if you say, like, okay, we have him, fuck it, let's move on, then the issue is the pressure that you're putting on him. Because we've seen, like, look at what's happening in the playoffs right now with Jokic and an injured Nuggets team, where, like, even if you're surrounding him with great defensive players, when you task one guy with doing everything on offense, you're tasking him with doing everything on offense for 82 games, and then the playoffs, when everything gets bogged down, there's more bodies being thrown at you, there are more schematic variations being thrown at you, and you can't make it through that. So that's why, like, I think you capitalized on the strength rather than just assume that strength is going to float you no matter what.
I think I agree with you too. And I know you use Luka Doncic as an example, but until this season, like, that was the perfect example in the playoffs. And now that he has Dinwiddie and Brunson, those two are better defenders than some, but neither of them are great defenders. And, well, they're no Donovan Mitchell, but sorry, that was so unnecessary. I'm tired. If you can get,
I'm confused because you just mentioned Donovan Mitchell and defense in the same sentence.
If you can use, let's use the Pelicans this season as an example, where yes, they have a Herb Jones, which Detroit doesn't have, so maybe they're better. Like, look at, and you need the one, like, really good wing defender for sure. Do you think that Sadiq Bey is going to be Cade Cunningham?
I think himself? It could be,
which is fine, but I think there's reason to believe that properly coached teams are able to build schemes where it's okay, maybe we're not forcing a ton of turnovers, but we don't foul a lot. We get back in transition. And if we're putting enough bodies, Detroit doesn't currently have the capacity to do this, but, like, they were 13th in offensive rebounding, I think. So if you're going to put enough bodies around the glass, pressure the other people who are grabbing the ball to stop them from getting in transition, I think it might be easier. And this is only something I've recently given thought to. Is it easier to outperform your talent on offense or defense? And I think it's defense.
I think it's defense. Yeah.
Even though defense is probably the thing about the NBA I understand the least.
It feels like you can scheme your way into competent defenses, but you can't really do the same on offense without shot makers, because you ultimately have to make baskets.
Look, we went over on the Detroit Pistons longer than anybody. That's how committed we are. So don't tell us we don't talk about every single team enough on this podcast. We're on our final team, Orlando Magic, 22-60. That's a bad record. But
what does the inevitable talent consolidation process look like? Mo Bamba needs a new contract, but Wendell Carter Jr. and a potentially healthy version of Jonathan Isaac are already there. They have so many young guards between Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs, Markelle Fultz. They still have RJ Hampton, Chuma Okeke. Beyond that, there are more top rookies incoming because they have a chance to get the number one pick. They have two of the top 4 picks in the second round, or top 5 picks in the second round. So at some point, enough is enough. And you can't just keep throwing in young player after young player. And what does that process look like? Does it mean that Bamba is walking? Does it mean that you're shopping Jonathan Isaac? Does it mean that you're shopping one of the actual young guys? Something has to give here, because as seems to be the case in Orlando for roughly the last 25 years, there are log jams in place.
I'm totally with you. And it's sort of like, we don't know where they're going to end up in the draft, but you look at this team, and I think you point to Jalen Suggs' cornerstone until proven otherwise. I know his rookie season was wonky with injuries.
You could still see it, though.
I see it too. And there's the load he was carrying at points. But I'm with the consolidation move, or at least you could call it a decongestion move, because even if they're not necessarily getting better, they just need to open runway somewhere. Because my question would actually be, who is the second guy here in Orlando?
I think
it's Franz Wagner.
Yeah, I didn't even mention Wagner because he's so obviously a centerpiece, but I still think it's Carter and then Wagner.
So, and do you have Jonathan Isaac behind both of them at this point?
I don't know, because what is he? And is he healthy? I mean, it's taken a long time for him to recover from these injuries. Is that just an abundance of caution? Is it him legitimately having trouble working his way back into the athletic shape necessary to do what he does? Was the offensive growth, which is such a small sample of proof, legitimate? Until we see him on the court.
If you have Wendell Carter Jr. as your 5,
right? Could Fultz still be the answer here? I mean, he looked really good in flashes.
No, he's not.
He's still young.
He's not as the number 2. There's no way.
Probably not. But I don't know that I'd totally rule it out.
What do you think is the bigger need? And I think even if they jump up high enough in the lottery, although they have the second best lottery odds, so they might end up with a big in the lottery, which I think that makes their situation even more interesting. Because do you think they could go the Cleveland route, where it's, we'll play Wendell Carter Jr., Jonathan Isaac, and let's say Paolo together, because I think he'd probably be the best fit alongside 2 bigs, and then Franz Wagner is just your 2, and you have Jalen Suggs at the 1.
Who knows?
So
I mean, maybe.
So draft aside, though, I think
let Chet Holmgren run the point.
I think between the draft and having Carter, or the option of keeping Isaac, that they're not their front court is set, but let's just say they're big. Like they don't have to do anything nuclear to figure out, can we get a playable big man? Or even a front court, because Wendell Carter Jr. Isaac, or Wendell Carter Jr. plus one of the rookies, or one of the rookies plus Isaac could work. What do you think is bigger for them? They do have more bodies, it seems, when you're looking at these ball handling guards. Is it finding an actual floor general, though? Or is it sort of carving out more two-way wings to where it's not?
I think it's the latter. I think it's the latter, because you don't really have a pathway to having those right now, unless you're a huge believer in Okiki. Beyond that, it's just a void, because at least with the ball handling options, there's something there. I mean, Suggs can absolutely turn into that guy who is the all-star point guard in this roster. Cole Anthony, I still believe in the talent there, even if there's a whole hell of a lot of volatility from a game-to-game perspective. Fultz, I keep coming back to that, because I see the flashes, and if he can stay healthy and is actually given a runway, maybe there's something there. So I see those options. I don't see the same options on the wings, and that's why that has to be the answer.
I actually go the opposite route, because I'm wondering, Franz Wagner was okay at the 3 this year anyway, and I wouldn't call him 3-and-D, even though he moved a lot better laterally on defense than I just, again, and this, I'm not a draft expert, so maybe other people were super high on his defense anyway. I look at the team, and I think Jalen Suggs is the only person who might meet the criteria of what you just laid out. I don't think it's Fultz. There's the huge hole in his game where you're working with someone who's just going to have that shooting void forever. And it's fine if he's hitting his mid-rangers. Right. Defenses won't care. They won't care. I don't think Cole Anthony is that. He seems more of the microwave jolt of adrenaline off the bench, which is a great player. To my dismay and chagrin, it's not RJ Hampton. There was always just a pace to his game where I thought it could be. I'm not, after this season, I don't think it's him. And so for Jalen Suggs, maybe he can be that guy. I think he will be best suited if he's not, where it's the question of can the Wizards put the right floor general around Bradley Beal? Jalen Suggs is in that same umbrella for me when looking at his peak. I could see him being a much better defender than Bradley Beal. I could see the 90th percentile of his career being better than Bradley Beal's. I just don't think he should have to be cast as that floor general. And so it would be more critical if I were the Magic to be like, how do we optimize his long-term offense? And I don't think anyone on this roster currently has a shot of doing that for them. Maybe I'm just way off, but I don't like if you're going to, I want to know who's the person you have to pick one that you're going to make the strongest case for in that discussion. And I'll probably feel pretty strongly that you're wrong. So that's not an invitation to make the case because I don't want to dump all over your takes, but that's where
it's fine. Yeah. And just to expand on that even a little more, I think the other thing is it's generally easier to build up a rotation of young players and have them develop if you have a really strong ball handling option on the floor at all times. We've seen so many teams struggle to develop bigs and forwards because they don't have a veteran presence at point guard who's capable of getting them the ball in advantageous spots. So if Suggs isn't that guy, you're putting a lot of pressure on him to be that guy.
That's also fair. This team they have so much talent, but it's not clarifying at the moment, if that makes any sense. And maybe the draft will be a little bit clarifying depending on where they land.
I don't think so.
I think it's actually going to be more muddying than not.
Yeah.
That was great and shorter for us.
Kind of.
Please remember to rate, review, subscribe to this podcast if you haven't done so already. If you've done all those things, please shout us out, help us promote the podcast, tell friends, family members, anyone on the internet likes basketball, retweet our promos, follow us on the socials, all of which Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, they're all in the, which one am I forgetting? Instagram? Oh, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Links are in the podcast description. Follow our YouTube channel. We're over 1K subscribers, but I am now posting organic content on YouTube in addition to IG and TikTok. So there are reasons to follow us everywhere, FYI. And join the Discord. I'm usually around during games, not so much when we're recording during a Phoenix New Orleans game per se, like a certain game 4. But until next time, leave with a shout out to the one, the only, the still in the playoffs, the lockdown. Is he going to head to the semifinals? I think he will because the Jazz are eventually going to implode. We all know it. Frank Ntilikina.